I don't know. Sick of being dumb. This is what I've ended up with. A piece of garbage. I have to figure out how to work around this big old problem. Another thought has occurred to me that the borax, which melts the scale or liquefies the scale and displaces it when you hammer blow and allows for a good forge weld, I'm wondering if the fact that I'm being heavy-handed with it, which I figured was helping, was working against me and actually lubricating, so it would liquefy the scale between the layers, but because there's so much liquid, whatever it is, maybe that was lubricating it and it was just allowing everything to move around. That's me just spitballing ideas, just throwing an idea out there to try and understand what may have gone wrong. The only option I'm seeing is to cut the topmost 16 layers off with an angle grinder. I mean, I'll cut it as far forward as I can and just slowly work back until I can find the earliest stage that it's forge welded successfully. Then that will leave me with basically all of this remainder minus this to try and form into something. But I can't use the entire piece because right here you can see that it is extremely warped, so likely I'll have to remove probably from there forward as well. So I'm probably going to end up with half the piece that I wanted to, or I can cut at an angle to try to keep as much as I can. Where it's thinnest here, I simply won't be able to use that. I could, in theory, actually, I was going to say I could actually forge this a bit longer. And whilst I could do that, I'll probably end up messing it up even more. So this may very well be blade number 3 that comes in with a fairly hefty compromise to the original idea. The first attempt at a knife I made had no tang, so there was nothing in the handle. The second attempt I made, I had a half decent tang on it, but the blade was basically doing what this one's gonna. I'm gonna have half of what I thought I did. But because of the shape, I may have a workaround. I don't know. It might be time to stop doing and to start thinking. I'll be back once I have an idea of what I'm doing. I've painted the parts that I think I need to cut off. So keeping this shape in mind as my usable area and disregarding this, I've drawn some sketches. As best I can, draw some sketches, rough ideas of different shapes, different styles. I basically just started scribbling within the confines of the cutout that I'm going to end up with. Here you can see I've drawn very roughly. I traced around the piece that I made. So that is the space that I can work within. So I've drawn a few different things. I have absolutely no idea. They're all very similar to each other. However, these two on this page, I've liked the most out of the 4. This one has the square edges, well, not square, but you know, the sharp edges here, which would probably make having this straight line yet a sweeping bevel kind of difficult to make, especially considering I've never dealt with a curved bevel before any of this. I've only sort of dealt with straight edged on my 2 knives that I've tried. I'm leaning towards this. I think it's the least complicated and least likely to go wrong. Then I have these guys. Let's just start over here for now. This is vaguely reminiscent of a Karadishi, I don't know, a Japanese knife. This one would be the simplest to make this beveled edge, being that it's straight, but looks garbage. I don't mind the look of this one. This one looks like a hoof, so I think I'll just disregard that one. This one I'd lose too much material here. I'd have to throw away a bunch, and I'm trying to utilize as much as I can. So I think out of these, this one's the most likely to make it through. But I like the first one better with the curved edge on top. And then I came to these few. I kind of like these. So this one's a bit like the first one with the curved edge. Has a little bit more of a sweep here. Not as aggressive as this one. I think that this sort of angle of a sweeping bevel will be harder for me to get right than this one. But I do kind of like the look that is vaguely reminiscent of a Bowie knife. Vaguely. So now I'm faced with the decisions. I think I'll just write off those four, which leaves me with this lot. So, goodbye to that one. Goodbye to that one. Goodbye to this one. So now I have these four to choose from. I like this one, but I think it's going to be too complicated. So see you later to that one. I simply don't know. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of any of them. I think they're all a bit poop. But yet again, you know, I'm limited by what material I have. So I'm struggling to decide here. Just bear with me. After calling an emergency meeting with the wife, it's this one. And we'll make this little mini chopper thing. I don't know what we're going to call it. I've made it up. The style doesn't exist, I don't think. So, that shape's not bad. Oh, now I don't know. But the problem with that is this would pretty much be an entire row of twisted Damascus gone if I was just to cut this shape out. No, we'll just leave it as it is. Just don't be stupid. That's what we're going to do. Now it's time to cut this part off. And then it's a whole bunch of grinding to get this thing where it needs to be. I'm worried about this curve here. And if I need to put it back in the forge and make that straight. Nah, I think the material is thick enough that I can grind a flat edge on both sides. And we should be okay still. There's a possibility that I'm going to be slightly disappointed in the outcome of this, because if you were watching one of the earlier videos of the chef knife that this was meant to be, the twists on the billet were quite loose and gradual at the handle end, and it became more steep angled lines towards the front. So you would have seen more layers at the front of the blade than you would at the back. The problem is I've had to cut the front off, haven't I? You can see these lines that run through here. That is the Damascus pattern that I'm going to end up with, or vaguely. By the time I grind more off and whatnot, it does change slightly. So it looks like this is just going to be a bunch of long lines with more long lines on top, which isn't what I had in mind. However, if this works, this is going to be my most successful Damascus yet. Even if it's not quite what I had in mind, it will be the most defined pattern that looks like it makes sense rather than just blotches and patches. So I've taken off a fair bit of the scale with the angle grinder. Didn't want to remove too much material before I went to the belt sander and went about flattening all of this off, which is the next step. But that can wait till tomorrow. I'm tired, I'm hungry. So there's been another hiccup. As you can no doubt see, my little outline is bigger than the piece that I have, which means that I need to modify my design again. So because I kind of liked the look of the shape when I got rid of this bevel. Maybe I'll use this as the overall shape, which would bring my bevel further here. I think it's the fact that my drawn bevel looks like garbage, but I think that is ever so slightly too long, but it will fit the piece much better. So now I'll, yeah. That's not working. Much better idea. Something like that. It's looking like it will need a little bit of tweaking. I'm sure I can figure something out. So I've done a revision of the design. I've kept very similar to that, but I have had to tweak it in order to get it to all fit on here without losing too much material. If I were to use this one, first of all, the dimensions are wrong for the tang, but second of all, it's considerably smaller. So I'm going to go with this. The tang is incredibly thin, so I'm going to have to bulk that up with the handle. I'll have to figure out at some point as well. But I figure the fact that it's a knife and not a hammer or anything, then having a thin tang shouldn't be too much of an issue. It's a delicate tool, not a sledgehammer. I've marked everything that I want to cut in blue. So now it's time to whip out the angle grinder and carefully cut it away. I wasn't meant to get that into it, but once I start this, I get so caught up in it and I lose track of time. This is roughly the shape. Ideally, my tang would be thicker. I probably should put it in the have put it in the forge, hammered it flat so I get a bit of a thicker tang, but then the join up here and whatever. So all I'll do is I'll make the handle a bit bigger. So I guess it will be like visible on the top, not visible at the bottom, maybe something like that. I don't know. I think that'd be a good little cutter. I'm a little bit concerned by this line through here. Hopefully I'll grind, as I grind that disappears, but I'm worried it's not a successful forge weld. I need to be really careful because I need to grind this flat, all of that. And then I also need to deal with the other side still. I need to make sure that I don't grind past center in relation to the tang. If I come too far off either way, I might be in a little bit of a pickle. But I think I've got enough substance here to make sure that as long as I'm careful, I should be okay. But I wish I had a surface grinder. But as it is, I'm doing it by hand and I just got to be super careful not to fuck it up. This is a long process. I'm not going to finish it today. I shouldn't have even done that much. I'll update you once I've got rid of all the scale and I've got it as even as I possibly can. I think I've pushed this as far as I'm willing. You can see I've still got bits of scale, really bad spot through here, but I figure all of that will disappear once I've ground some bevels into it. So it's a bit too thick still. I've made the top edge pretty flat in the hopes that I can put it in my little knife jig and we can grind the bevel. I'm not sure if I'm going to go for a swooped bevel just along the bottom, or if I'm going to go from top to bottom with the bevel like you would a normal chef's knife or cook's knife. I think that's what I'll do because I'm a little bit more confident. I think I have less chance of messing it up if I do it that way. I might be about to run into an issue because it is not perfectly straight this way. it is curved. I was hoping to fix that with the bevels, which I can do, but I don't know if I can do it with this. So here's my issue. Here you can see that there's some gaps underneath, which is less than ideal. But the bigger issue is if you do this and that gap is a major problem. That top edge is pretty good, which does make me wonder that if I just grind this thick part down thinner, significantly thinner, that should drop this gap down lower. Oh, I've been grinding for so long. I guess I'm going to do some more. I am having a seriously rough time getting this to not be stupid. As you can see, I managed to flatten this off a little bit on this side. This edge is pretty good. This edge, this warps up a little bit. So I'm thinking if I put the flattest edge against the jig, grinding the bevels should hopefully rectify a lot of this. And then once that's been rectified, I can flip it around and work on the other side. So I'm going to start grinding bevels. Oh boy. This video has already gone on a bit too long, so I'm going to continue grinding. I've picked up some more grinder belts from 40 grit all the way up to 400 grit. I'm going to keep working on this thing. I'll come back once I've got it to a point where I'm happy. It would seem that grinding nicely is really quite difficult. This is what I've ended up with. This became considerably thinner, which meant that I had to grind the handle down, but in doing so I did tap up here as well, which I'm not too thrilled about. Just another one of those things. It's not perfect, it's not quite symmetrical. There's one side that's a little bit more angled than the other, and that's a result of the tang not being perfectly flat and being held at, even angles either side in the jig. So it'll sit, say, perfectly vertical here, but then when I flip it around to hold it with the other side of the tang, if it's off center a little bit, which it most certainly was, then you get a discrepancy in the angles. I'm not going to worry about it. You can see, in person, you can see quite clearly where the top layers were forged onto the others. Again, I don't think it's anything that I need to be worried about. I only used an 80 grit because, as per usual, I lost a lot more material than I expected. I think we're up to heat treat now. Time for heat treat. I will heat up the oil with a piece of steel again, like I did on the last one. Get that hot, drop it in there, get the oil up to about 50 degrees Celsius. Then I will put this in the forge, get it hot to the point that it stops being magnetic, and then go just a little bit hotter, and then quench it in the oil. Yeah. And again, I've overheated the oil. So I'm going to let this cool off just a little bit, fire up the forge again, and then deal with the blade. I'm struggling to tell if this is biting or if it's... Nope, that's not hard. I'm going to try again. Looks different this time. I think we did it. I think now it's temper time. So it goes into the oven now for 1 hour at 210 degrees. allowed to cool, and then back into the oven for another hour. All right, so it's been tempered now. You can see vaguely the pattern that's going to emerge. Doesn't look like I suffered any major warpage or anything, which is good. I wanted to get this, you know, sanded, ground down, and put in the acid for the pattern reveal this episode, but I had a few things that needed taken care of today and yesterday, so that took priority. This is going on hold. So next week, hopefully I'll be finishing off the blade and all of that and putting a handle on it. So until next time, thanks.